April 9th, 2018. I'd like to read a statement regarding the Humboldt Broncos. Like most Canadians, my heart sank when I first heard that a bus carrying members of the Humboldt Broncos hockey team was involved in an accident Friday night. As the hours went by and we learned of the depth of this tragedy and that 15 people on their way to play hockey, an activity that's part of our cultural fabric, had lost their lives, my heart was broken. No words can adequately express the sincere sorrow we feel for families and friends of the 15 people who lost their lives. To those people and to the community of Humboldt, we share your grief. You are all in our thoughts and prayers, and hope you can find strength in knowing that we are all Broncos. Flags at the city of Waterloo will be at half-mast until Friday, and most municipalities are following that. Thank you. Disclosure of pecuniary interest and the general nature thereof from councillors. Seeing none. Approval of the minutes from the Committee of the Whole on March 5th, 2018. Do I have a mover? Councillor Durrell, Mayor Jaworski. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Okay, so we have a couple delegations tonight. Let's start with Communitech, and we have Ian Klugman, President and CEO. Welcome, Ian.
Thank you. But thank you very much for your partnership and your support. We're very, very proud of what we've been able to do in Waterloo region over the last number of years, and so we would not have been able to do it without, first and foremost, the support of the municipalities here. So, as we know, about 20-some years ago, a group of people got together with some big ideas about this community. And they said, let's all pitch in to building an organization that's going to solve the issues that we're facing and allow us to build the kind of industry that will ensure the prosperity of this community. And when we think about what Communitech is, it truly is a movement. It's a commitment to saying, let's gang up together to figure out how do we take on all those other jurisdictions around the world that are competing in the innovation economy. We are very much a mission. We help tech companies start, grow, and succeed. And the word help is very, very important to us because we're here to serve. We're not here to, take any attention away from the community or from the great companies in the region. We really are here to serve. We do that in three distinct ways. We are places. We are an urban strategy that's grounded in urban employment in the downtown cores of Kitchener and Waterloo. Place is important because place can act as the epicenter for innovation and entrepreneurship. Place creates density, which is important to building strong ecosystems. And place is also a home. When people are doing startups, it's lonely, and having people nearby who've been through the same thing is hugely beneficial to building great companies. We're also programs. We support tech companies at every stage, from startups to scale-ups to big global multinationals. And then we're partners in building an ecosystem. And partners is really important because it's not a top-down strategy to building an innovation ecosystem. And as our good friend Kevin Tour likes to say, there's no God of an ecosystem, there's only profits. And it really does take a team effort to build a great ecosystem, and that includes, putting this place on the map, ensuring we've got the right kind of community that's going to attract and retain the best talent, and ensuring that we've got the right kind of public policy framework in place to support this community and our companies. And so when we started down this bigger strategy 8-9 years ago, we had some what we thought were big aspirational goals, and of course it turned out that over the last 9 years we've had some greater success than we could ever have dreamt of. And when we think about what we've done lately within the last 12 months, you can see that we have done a lot of work at not only just building or supporting the growth of the companies, but also really putting the community on the map and connecting people into the bigger strategy. And when we look out as to what's next and what we're paying attention to, there's a few key areas, one of which is around data. And we all know about, Internet of Things and autonomous cars, but it's actually data which is the fuel. And it's data-driven companies of startups and scaling companies and large global multinationals where we think the big opportunity is. And so part of the strategy with the Data Hub is to really focus on not just the data component of it, but also the transformative platforms that we're going to be rolling out over the next while. Of course, are going to be headquartered at the Data Hub. Advanced manufacturing and Internet of Things, we were part of the successful supercluster for advanced manufacturing. We're very excited about that. It is a good fit for us and what we do here. It's the intersection between manufacturing and technology. We will continue to work on supporting great companies and getting them to scale and growth. We will, of course, always pay attention to talent because it is the fuel of the economy. And then the final thing that's a big priority for this year that we're in is really bringing the world to Waterloo region. So we, about 18 months ago, decided to roll up everything we've been doing from an event perspective and really convene a conversation, a global conversation here, because we believe that we've earned the right to do so as a community. And so we have put all of our efforts into something that's called True North. And of course, we're going to be convening this big conversation. We are starting with 2,500 people this year. We would like to make that number a lot bigger in subsequent years. But it's really a conversation around two things. One of which is around the kinds of shifts that are happening and the implications of those shifts, whether it's fake news or job displacement, or it has to do with gentrification and a lot of the issues that we're going to be facing over the next little while. But also the second part of the narrative for this conference is, well, what is it we need to start to do tomorrow to make sure that we bridge to a better future? A real sense that if we are not intentional, if we don't pay attention, a lot of these big shifts that are happening are going to potentially have significant downturn for us. So it really is a conference about optimism. It's a conference that says, well, the rest of the world has built companies on a different set of values. Perhaps it's time for Canada to play a role and for us to think about how do we build tech for good on the back of the great values that undergird our country. So it was about a year ago that we came through talking about the big plans for the Data Hub in Uptown Waterloo. And we talked about the need for a partnership that would allow us to do these kinds of things. We are about halfway through in our roadmap as to what we wanted to achieve. And some big, not big, but some more to follow as far as some of the other announcements coming up around the Data Hub. We opened in May of last year. We're going to be having a party to celebrate our first anniversary on May the 10th. We'll make sure that everybody here is invited to come and check out and see the progress that we've made and the plans for the future. We've got a pretty strong number of companies that are located at the Data Hub, small, medium, and large. And in fact, Skywatch just won the Google Demo Day in California just last week, which is the top startups from across North America. And so I'll end where I began, which is in saying thank you for the support of the City of Waterloo. Everything that we have done has always started with the commitment of Council. And on that, we hope to build great things. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that. That's a great update. And it's very exciting to see that building in Uptown Waterloo thriving and alive. Are there any comments or questions from councillors? Mayor Jaworski.
Thank you very much. Through the chair. You mentioned about scaling up as becoming a focus area for the future, and I think that we've done a really great job here at helping create companies, so generating the startups, and we have some big companies that have done very well for advocacy. How do we cross that divide of helping people scale from the 50 to the 500? Or what sort of initiatives might you look into for that?
Right. So there's a few things that we are running now. We are partners with the province of Ontario in the Scale Up Voucher program. And there's a number of Waterloo-based companies that are going to be successful through that initiative. We have what are called growth coaches that really focus on helping scaling companies. And we had to learn along the way as to what would be beneficial and valuable for companies to get them onto a high growth curve. And I think the interesting learning that we had coming out of this is that, helping people start companies, you're dealing a lot with difficult problems and solving riddles. Helping people grow and scale their companies, you're dealing with issues of complexity. And so it's a lot about people and talent. It's a lot about how do I double the workforce and yet retain the culture that made it successful? How do I manage remote teams? How do I build operational capability to support 1,000 customers as opposed to 5? And so as far as what we're doing is we're really trying to pay attention to the coaching aspect of that and how can we help people through these challenges that are very different than the ones that they had to solve as a startup.
Great. Thank you very much for coming tonight, Ian.
Thank you very much.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Durrell.
That's okay. I'm way at the end over here. Thanks for coming in. That was a great presentation. It just kind of struck me because we're talking about companies, and I know that there's been a lot of initiatives to get more women involved in tech. And I'm wondering, how is that going? I'm looking at a picture with all men here, and I know that it's been a bit of a struggle as far as you started some programs, but tell me a little bit about how we're doing in this community, and are we seeing the uptake, and are we ever going to get to that, or when will we get to the 50% off?
It's a really good question. I mean, the data that we do have is that 3 years ago, about 8% of the people who are going through our intake process, we do about 400 companies through the intake process on an annual basis, were female founders, and last year 35% through the process were female founders. So there's a lot happening. There's definitely a big shift that's happening right now, and it's very, very exciting. And so with our programs such as Fierce Founders, which focuses on female founders, we continue to support both at the boot camp level with that initiative and also with the accelerator program. And I think that our hope is that with launching Fierce Founders, we got tremendous response, lots of traction, and I think that there's been a lot of interest from across the country in what is this model, and it seems to be working, and can we replicate it? And so I think that we're going to see more and more of these types of initiatives that really focus on helping the sort of the early barriers that get in the way, and letting people start bigger than they would otherwise. There's also been a lot of work around funding of female founders with Stand Up Ventures, which of course is launched by BDC. They committed $70 million initially, and I think it's $200 million dedicated fund for female founders. So I think everybody in the ecosystem is starting to pay attention to this and lean in.
Anyone else? Okay. Thank you again very much for coming out tonight.
Thank you again for your support.
Okay, and next up, this month is Poetry Month, and I would like to turn it over to the mayor to introduce this next section or segment of our meeting tonight.
Thank you. Poetry City is an annual celebration of poetry facilitated by mayors and city councils all across Canada that recognizes UNESCO World Poetry Day and National Poetry Month. By inviting a poet to read at a city council meeting in either March or April, Canadian cities have a chance to bring poetry into the public eye and showcase local talent. Waterloo is one of more than 20 municipalities participating in the challenge this year, and it was something that was certainly brought to my attention, I think in 2015, by Mayor Nenshi of Calgary. So a great opportunity to bring somebody into our council chambers and let's recognize some poetry.
So we have our staff person, Amy Ross, who's going to introduce our poet this evening. Thanks, Amy.
Good evening, Mayor Jaworski and council, staff and citizens. 2018 marks the 20th year of National Poetry Month in Canada, so there's something to celebrate. As the mayor pointed out, the Poetry City Challenge is an important opportunity to showcase the breadth of local artistic talent. Allow me to introduce Lama Abdallah, a grade 12 student at Sir John A. Macdonald Secondary School in Waterloo, who aspires to be a recognized writer and a neurologist. Lama is a Palestinian Canadian who loves to get involved through volunteerism. Along with learning, extracurricular activities, and reading, Lama enjoys writing poetry, fiction, and creative nonfiction, and sharing these works with others whenever possible. As a lover of art in all forms, Lama believes that everyone has a story that only they can tell, and an obligation to themselves to tell their story in whatever way they can. It is important to strive to listen and learn from the words of others. Poetry is a powerful medium for self-expression. In Lama's poem, Fluent in Excuses, winner of the University of Waterloo's He for She Writing Contest, she shares experiences as a Muslim woman in Canada. Lama looks forward to sharing more of her works and with others and contributing to the diverse arts and culture in this community and Canada as a whole.
Good evening, everyone. I'm very honored to be here. Thanks for having me. My poem is called Fluent in Excuses. Amy did a very good job of describing it, so I'll just get right to it then. You have molded me into a native speaker of excuses. The straight, unaugmented truth is a decrepit book written in a forgotten language, faded and weighted down by the threat of time, weeping dust when at last it is woken. And I am the isolated author, trying to remember forgotten tastes and textures that were once sweat and pain and laughter and a happy ending in the covers of a leather-bound manuscript. I want my happy ending back. And I will go through pain and sweat and laughter to get it. No more. No, I'm not dying of heat. The first day of fasting is usually hardest. Fighting to get past a cage of clenched teeth. No more. No, I'm not dying of heat. You get used to it. No more. Oh, it isn't that bad. I don't have to do my hair every morning since it's covered up anyway, slithering from the barrier of my lips. And no more of the questions in your squinted eyes and pitying expressions. Does your religion make you starve yourself? Will you be forced into an arranged marriage? Is your father allowed to beat you? Does he make you dress like that? Why you and not him? 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 Why you? No more. I am not oppressed. How dare you imply that I don't know my own mind? That I am so weak I bend to the wills of the men in my life, that this scarf is on my head for any other reason than my wanting it to be. That I am a victim, trapped in the chains of a barbaric faith. No more. I will relearn what has been forgotten. I will dust off the rumpled pages and lose myself in the beauty again. Yes, I am a little hungry, and I choose to be. Yes, I am hot, and I am glad. Yes, I choose to wear the hijab. And no, I will not be your excuse to victimize women of my kind. I will speak exactly what is on my mind, without worrying how it conflicts with your views on telling a woman how you think she should dress. Thank you.
Thank you, Lama. That was beautiful. Is anybody comments or? Councillor Burke. Got your name for a minute.
That's okay. It happens. One of the great blessings of this job I've discovered over the past 3.5 years or so is the opportunity to meet people from communities that maybe I wouldn't otherwise get the opportunity to do, and learn a great number of things from them. And I just want to say that I think that should be required reading, not just for students, but for everyone. And thank you.
Councillor Freeman.
Thank you. I just want to say this is the second time I've heard you share your poem. And I want to say congratulations on your award from the University of Waterloo. And it was great to have a second chance to hear it. Thank you.
Okay. Again, thank you, Lama, for coming tonight and sharing that with us. And we hope to hear more from you.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Have a good evening. You can stay if you want. Okay, moving on, we have no presentations and there is no consent motion. Item 6A, the collaborative municipal funding for key cultural institutions, 2-year summary. The report is in the package by Estero. Are there any, there's no presentation? No. Are there any questions or from council? Okay, so I would like to move that this report be accepted as information. Councillor Freeman, do you have a second? Or? Well, someone told me we do. It's a new thing. Councillor Burke seconded that. Councillor Freeman?
I just wanted to say thank you. I think this was a really great summary of information that answers a lot of questions that more broadly people in the community ask where those cultural institutions are concerned. And so I think it's a really great report to be able to point to that. And because it was collaboratively done, I think that's really good too.
Any more comments? I'll call the motion. All in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Okay, and item B is the Uptown Public Realm Strategy Background Document, Assets, Opportunities, and Vision, prepared by Janice Moore, and we have a presentation by Janice Mitchell, Janice Mitchell. Janice Moore was here last time. Janice Mitchell, Policy Planner. Good evening.
Yes. I don't even know what to say to that. I'm pleased to be here to introduce this item. Do you want me to put it up? Okay, thank you. And I will say I'm only going to be here the briefest of moments, and then I'm going to pass it to Brenda Webster-Tweel from Stantec's Urban Places Group, and she's going to explain more of the details around what you see in your packet in terms of the background document. Lissy, are you going to put the presentation up? We'll just get that started. And as I said, I'm just going to kick it off with the first slide or two and then pass it on. So this document and this study in general, the Uptown Public Realm Strategy, was built out of change that we saw happening in Uptown around our land use framework. We have a framework that looks forward to intensification, so very much a different built form than we have now. We, of course, see a lot of transportation and infrastructure changes. And we wanted to make sure that as we moved forward, that our public spaces were keeping up and changing as well. So there's really just a slide here that speaks to that, and say we want to make sure as Uptown evolves, we have a clear strategy for what our urban places are going to look like as well. So the spaces between, around, within the buildings that are accessible to the public. So how do we make sure that as our built form changes, we make sure our public spaces are changing as well. So this presentation and this document that you see before you tonight, it really is the sort of the culmination, finishing off of phase 1, which is the background document. And it's a kickoff point into going to phase 2, which is actually the preparation of the strategy. So Brenda and her team have done a tremendous job of putting together this document. I think it's a great starting point, stepping off point. It starts to touch on the opportunities and the vision for moving forward, as well as providing just a ton of background information as they've learned about our community. So, and I know that Brenda and her team have also done a tremendous job of the public consultation piece in particular. So she's going to talk a little bit about that, and I know some of you were there to experience that with us. And I think that that was really a big part of the success story in terms of why we've ended up with a great document at this point. So without saying anything more on that, I'll introduce Brenda Webster-Tweel from Stantec's Urban Places Group, and she'll explain a little more about that document and the process.
Thank you, Janice. That was a fantastic introduction. And yes, being able to share our ideas through the charrette and the public forum definitely was a highlight for our team as well, after doing all the work in the background, preparing and then coming out to the public. We were very fortunate to be so well received, and we really felt like the kickoff, even though we're saying today is the official day, working through the charrette was a very important series of sort of working through of options for the strategy going forward. So why are we here? Are we going backwards here? Sorry. Okay, why now? The Waterloo context. Waterloo is a city on the cusp of dramatic change, as Janice pointed out, and in particular you can see the Uptown in bright yellow there because that is the identified primary node for growth for the city of Waterloo. So that's where we are focusing our attention on the background document. We have young people here who will grow with the LRT. They're pretty excited about it. The growth of the city will really truly be represented by the youth of Uptown today will grow with the LRT and with the greening and with all the strategies that come with growth. We know that the transformations have already begun, probably when those children were just, in a twinkle in someone's eye. And those were the Waterloo Town Square, significantly transformed from where it was. Also the King Street as a complete street. Congratulations to everybody involved in that. That I'm sure was a significant effort and it's fantastic. When we first came to work on the project, it was definitely a building site, so we lived through the transformation with you over our meetings here. And then finally this moment when 1, 2, 3 testing, the LRT is actually coming. So all very exciting moments. And what is public realm? We really wanted to just create one slide that would explain it to everybody, so here's the reveal. This is I've shown this slide before too throughout the process of the charrette and so on, but a group of people who call themselves fine young urbanists wanted to build a sketch in real life. So they wanted to show a sketch of what public realm is, what is the part of the city that truly belongs to the pedestrian and the cyclist. So they literally built a light blue platform that covered the cycling, the pedestrian, where the cafes go, and the facade of the building. And so, as Janice said, the space between the buildings is truly the space that belongs to everybody, and how do we make the most of it? It's not always the size that matters, but it's how it's created and how it's presented and how we, as citizens, recognize that it belongs to us as a community. So, our public realm strategy considerations. We realized that one of the big issues, just walking up and down King Street, there's a significant amount of heritage in Uptown, and to really support that heritage, how to connect people. I know there's the Waterloo loops already, and how to build on those loops and on the trails to really build on connectivity. The parks and open spaces, there's so many award-winning landscapes in Uptown, and the question is really how to engage them, how to make them welcoming, and how to connect them between each other. Also, as a young architect, I used to make pilgrimages here because there kept being these award-winning buildings being built. It just seems like there's a preponderance of Governor General's award-winning buildings here in Waterloo. Again, how to connect them back into the city to King Street, how to make more people aware of all the kind of wealth of great design that exists here and how to connect it back. And connected in with the arts and culture, and then finally back to that previous slide to actually frame the public realm so that everybody is aware of what is open to everybody. We held our public forum and our charrettes in the CG building, and of course that is in fact a public park. Again, not everybody aware of that, so these are the sort of things that we want to shed light on. Connectivity, as we brought up, obviously tremendous parkland and a creek, and how to connect those back. They're just a block away or 2 blocks away from King Street, but probably many people who might visit King Street might not know about the excitement that's just around the corner. Parks and open space, the original town square, just at the kind of hook of King, and how to highlight what it is, what it was, bring its history back to life. You look at some of the early images, and kids are jumping around in the fountain, and it's very lively, and there's just great promise there as well. And arts and culture are a great way to activate. Certainly in the charrettes, a lot of discussions about art and culture came up. And finally, back to framing the public realm. This map, as you can see, just talks about where there are street frontages and where there are not, and where we might want to push to frame the public realm better to create that feeling of an outdoor room. Public realm pilots. So throughout this process, we've talked a lot about, and in the charrette, that public realm changes don't have to be heavy investment. And in some cases, all you need is a bag of leaves to pilot your public realm project. This is a public realm project in Toronto where neighbors just took all their leaves and reimagined an intersection that was a little bit dangerous by laying leaves down and then just painting a little line. So we really believe that there are great opportunities, especially with kind of genius minds in this town, to think about quick, easy ways to change things. Just working quickly through, we did a whole mapping our Uptown exercise. We worked with staff and then stakeholders and then the whole community. We moved on to mapping where everybody had their hands on the table. We looked at framing the public realm, complete streets, greening our Uptown, and those are just 3 of, I think we had 20 maps in the end that came out of this charrette. It was very exciting. The mayor introduced the public forum in the evening, and then we created the background documents, which you have received, which outline everything that just came before. And the public forum was, the great finale was the 3 men sitting in the chairs chatting about what public realm is and how we can work through what came out in the charrette. And next steps, this is a simple schedule of what is coming and where we are today. So now I'm open for questions.
Thank you very much for that. Are there any questions from council? Councillor Freeman.
One of the things that was interesting to me, and I hadn't expected to see it in the report, was the conversation that what happened around enhancing the civic character around City Hall. Because I think a lot of times, because it's not on the main street, that I didn't actually think that it would come up. I guess I could envision the connections to Waterloo Park and around Caroline and Urban Bridgeport, and so this whole notion of enhancing the civic character around City Hall really kind of excites me, and I'm looking forward to see where that might go and how that integrates and makes City Hall feel more a part of Uptown.
Yes, we were discussing that earlier today, actually, and one of the sort of critical moments is the moment when you're on Regina and you're looking towards City Hall, and there's this amazing creek there, but you have no idea that there's a public art and a creek because it's hidden by trees, and sometimes, or there's a transformer. Anyway, there's a bunch of things on the ground that keep you from not knowing that there's this great piece of promise, and that's the kind of excitement around the corner thought that led us to this location. Excuse me.
I don't know why my mic is like feeding back, so I'm not quite sure how to make it not do that. But the other thing that I really liked too was the identification that came out in this study around some of the connectivity issues that we do have in Uptown that are really confusing. So the trail connection on King Street where the Ion takes the turn, and just whose space that is and how can it be shared, and how do we create a safe transition there. It's really confusing, and I think one of the things that I was thinking about, and I'm not sure where it fits in, is this whole notion that the item that you showed there with the leaves and the rebuilding of the street. I mean, it would be interesting to know what kind of opportunities we have for that kind of serendipitous citizenry involvement, because I think a lot of people see things in the city where they would just love to take road chalk to it. And you know, in Eastridge, for example, where I am, there's a lot of places where children cross the street to go to school that wouldn't warrant an always stop. They don't warrant a crosswalk, but people want to have some kind of something there to remind people that it's a shared space and that you could expect to see a child there, and it doesn't have to be a formalized transportation marking. So I think in Uptown, because we know that people transition between the sidewalks across the road into the public square and to the jazz festival and so on. I don't know. I love what happened on the laneway next to the Button Factory, and I don't know what other opportunities that we have for things like that. And so I thought that this report kind of starts to unpack some of that conversation.
That's also where we're at in terms of this small move idea and definitely citizen participation. And I would love it if any ideas, I'm just going to go to the end because there is stay involved at waterloo.ca/Uptown Play to just send ideas there and look at what's there and send your ideas forward. And because we're looking also for ways to put more, half the charrette was what's the big picture, and then we did a timeout, and then the last hour was what pilots can you think of? So every team had to come up with one of those ideas that you're talking about that could be deployed in a weekend, this whole tactical urbanism thing. And I think that's just a wonderful thing, because then there's more buy-in long-term, because you do something quick, and then you get the response, and maybe you're alone, or maybe there are 100 people who want to do that, and then you make it a bigger, and it kind of grows. Yeah.
Awesome, thank you. Councillor Whaley?
Well, I must say, Brenda, you had me captivated on page 1 of this report when you said that the Uptown generates a sense of optimism for the people who live and work there. And what a place to start, starting in a place of optimism. So as I flipped through your report page after page, became more engrossed in it. It's interesting that we talked about poetry tonight, because your poetic ending was for us to take a diverse set of desire lines to weave together an urban fabric. How poetic, and a great conclusion. So the report for me was well received, but then I got to the appendix and I saw that you drew on 14 different studies in the city of Waterloo, all on the same theme, pretty much all on the same theme, about the Uptown, the quality of life, and all the things they have to work out. 14 separate studies. And because of your bold start here, the last thing that I hope for when we get your concluding statements is report number 15. That's the last thing that I hope will not happen. So perhaps what we could do is have a compendium of the first 14, fold it into the 15th, so we don't review it as just another 15th in a series, but rather the starting point, that optimistic starting point for something new and fresh that looks back on the 14 and points to number 1 and how we move forward from there. I'm looking forward to, I know you, from what I've seen in the report, I know that you have the capability to dream those big dreams, and I'm looking forward for you to capture that as you come up with your final summation.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
And Councillor Durrell?
So, I mean, Councillor Whaley, I mean, obviously some of these studies we're using on a regular basis, right? So I think it's important that we say these are all important, and that they're not collecting dust, that we're using them on a daily basis as we plan our city. So it's an important new thing. I think for me, like, obviously I'm all in. I love my Uptown, and what I'm really hoping that you can help me with here is it's changing so fast, and I feel like and that communication to at this point is just it's really quick, and I don't know if we're doing the best job that we can as far as and that was one of the things I really wanted to see happen in Uptown, was we knew where we were going and we all felt really comfortable, and I guess you just can't have that when your city is changing so quickly. But my biggest struggle is that and what I want to know is when we get finished with this, when you come back in August, what does that, and not that you can tell me what it's going to look like, but how do we use it to change? Like, tell me.
Yeah. I think that I think we get a glimpse of that in the way that we ran the first process. So we were very hands-on. We opened up CG to stakeholders and the public, and everybody was very engaged in setting down what the vision is. So that's kind of an indicator of where we're going. Mm-hmm. We really do impress on, the bag of leaves, the agility, the quickness, the iterative process. We're working with a group right now, not on this project, but they have something called a kit of parks. It's literally just a box of pieces that you take and you throw out into a park. We're going to make a lot of suggestions about testing. We believe that the way that you set all this in motion is that you do, it's sort of two-part. One part is keep testing ideas that come out from the public and that come out from this strategy. Mm-hmm. And the other one is setting some ground rules that everybody agrees on so that when people come forward with big ideas, there's a very clear character description of places like King Street, of the Civic District, of the kind of brain trust area of the Perimeter Institute and CG, that there are true, there really is an organic personality to Uptown, and to describe it very clearly and to give it urban principles. Simple things.
Something that we'll see it. Will you actually name some of those districts? Is that part of what we'll get from
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then from there, our staff will take it, and then when a building or development happens in that area, they'll say, "This is the district. This is how it feels, and this is what the community has agreed upon as the realm around it."
And there's a term that Scott kept bringing up, comfort. How do we describe comfort? And some of the principles that we are laying down talk about things like minimum number of hours of sunlight on this sidewalk at this day, at this time. So March 21st, 5 hours of daylight must be on this sidewalk. So if it's there now, first of all, it has to be there now. So
right.
Whatever's there now will stay.
Okay.
And so if a development comes along, it's not just show me your shadow. You'll say, we know that the sun is here at this time of day, and we need 5 hours of sunlight on this sidewalk. If there's any chance that your building will be obstructionist of this, that's privatization of daylight. We won't allow it. So there will be clear metrics. It was actually started by a Canadian and is now used around the world. It's called the Bosselman Study, and it's specifically about how we collectively have a right to daylighting. So there will be specific principles that we will name that you will be able to hang on to as what makes Uptown great today, and as it densifies, that it will shed further light on those great pieces.
Okay, thank you. Oh, well, I was just the one thing I did notice, and I love that Councillor Willie said his favorite quote, because the one thing that I'm going to get tattooed on my arm, oh no, I can't even find it. You can go to somebody else and I'll tell you my new tattoo. Yeah, Councillor Henry.
So what I'm hearing is Councillor Durrell is having, I can't even find it, tattooed on her arm.
Right.
And I'll just leave that there. So a couple of comments first, then a question for you. First, some things that I really liked about having been to the public session. So I've heard stuff that happened there. So the new thing I saw in here that I found really interesting was thinking about cool and funky lighting strategies and how that intersected with our laneways and alleyways. I know we've got a plan later this summer to deal with some funky lighting on King around the trees that will help grow up with them. We have Wonders of Winter has been a long-term institution in Waterloo Park that provides some good animation of a winter space, but some of the ideas that you've begun to sketch out around how we connect all of those pieces and really allow people to curate or have some temporary installations and really think of lighting.
The tech sector in.
As being an interesting opportunity. So I note that as something that jumped out as really interesting, and I think has some potential for legs. The second thing I'll just note is, while I was reading this, this afternoon, we had our annual sort of note come around from staff on everything that we were going to disrupt in the city in terms of reconstructing and maintenance, and Regina from Herb to William was on the list, so I sent a brief note over to, Ron Ormston, our, engineering folks in the team about, I know this is just an easy maintenance, we're just, milling and paving, we're not doing a reconstruct, so there's no really big ideas you can accomplish, but there were a couple of crossings of that for the spur line and at Willis that I think are good opportunities, and Ron agreed and forwarded it to staff, so hopefully we can get some heads together and see what simple, cheap, interim solutions we can do within the existing right-of-way to help make those a little bit better in the short term before we get to a reconstruction. So, so those are at least that's the serendipitous stuff that happened in my head and over the browser this afternoon that I thought was useful. We don't want to miss that opportunity. So the question I have for you is around sort of the cultural institution and the cultural sort of district areas you were speaking to. I didn't see, the idea of what a cultural venue was defined in a way that I could recognize based on the mapping. In here. So I'm curious as to how you came to that, because there were only a few venues, and I couldn't figure out what the criteria was to use them to identify them as a cultural venue on the map. Because there's like a half dozen of them, and at the same time you say, well, there's 20 music venues, and there's all these places, and the city's cultural plan had really defined, culture more out of the box as really any form of human expression, and we tried to really live up to that rather than just a bricks and mortar definition of it. So I'm also not sure how I'm going to use that in the context of other things that we've done. So I'm wondering how you're getting to that cultural venue piece and what you're thinking on that and what might come out of that. Because that's the first hesitation I had when I read it.
Great.
Just to give you.
Confusion. I think, first of all, we're only talking about what's outside the buildings. So we're talking about the spaces between the buildings, so things that spill out from those cultural institutions, so ground floor animation that may lead to outdoor spaces, having some resonating from what's going on indoors, and that the Uptown has sort of nodes of different types of cultures, and so there's a kind of academic culture, there's a civic culture, there's 24/7 culture.
Oh, sorry.
So you're part of that one, anyway, so really, it's probably that last definition that you gave, which is, there's culture in everything. And maybe we highlighted a few, but even as we were doing that, we realized we could have put stars all the way down King Street and all over, around the Perimeter Institute. And so I think in the next iteration, we'll be definitive about how we see that. Another way that we describe it, which probably didn't come across well enough, possibly in the document, is this concept of cultural gardens. So what do we do in the public spaces and in the parks that actually highlight what's going on inside the buildings, and how do we make note of that? So we starred areas where we felt we could make a difference in the public realm to balance out what's going on inside. We had a conversation earlier today about this project, about how fascinating that we're very clear about everything that happens indoors in terms of the pedestrian, very concerned about safety and so forth. But the minute you go open the door and go outside, it's a completely different world. It's the world of the car, it's the world of something else. And so how do you balance that, and how do you lengthen that threshold, in this case the cultural threshold, between the culture that's happening inside and what's happening on what Scott called earlier today along King Street, which is the sort of the front porch of Uptown?
Yeah, I think that's certainly helpful to delineate and clarify and see how we're going to use that. The other thing that occurred to me that I didn't quickly jot down on my notes just to raise, I know whenever you're defining a strategy, the first thing that we have to do is plan around a boundary, and we're very clear about what that boundary is, and then when we're running the numbers and looking at metrics, we're running it inside the boundary, and that causes some challenges in how we measure public space, because Waterloo Park, not in the boundary, and yet huge, and a huge part of how people see see Uptown. So that's both dealt with and not dealt with, depending on where you are in the document so far.
Yeah, and another point on that is, there are different, the ability of an outdoor space to attract and hold citizens has a lot to do with what's around that outdoor space. So while the park is outside, everybody knows it's there. It's in the mind share. And there are many parks that are inside Uptown, and it's not necessarily how many acreages or square feet are available, but it's how they're designed and what is happening around them that makes sure that they're used. Don't always like to use Toronto examples, just a place I know. David Crombie Park is still held today as one of the most vibrant parks in the city with mixed-use housing around it. And it is well-loved and well-used, and it only met 20% of the required open space, comparing that to Jamestown, which met 100% of the outdoor requirements, and yet there's nowhere for anybody to do anything. So the size and of a place doesn't always give great measure to how well it's loved and used, and that's something we want to emphasize too. What is it that we can do to just bend the curve on how people use what's already there?
I think that's certainly valuable. Certainly Barrel Warehouse Park is an excellent example of a space that looks private but is really public and is actually quite fascinating, and has a number of different spaces you can discover in a small area that meets. I think that the New York, the Midtown example park I've seen before as an interesting space, and there's a lot in that Barrel Warehouse that ticks some of those boxes as well. It's just not very well used, but there are many. There's a lot of potential there. But the reason I raised the boundary question, and this is something I know is close to Councillor Durrell's heart as the ward councillor, but we've invested a substantial sum of money to substantially expand Alexandra Park, which is like literally a block off of the map in the corner. It has children's play facilities. It's got other things, and then I read but there's nothing inside Uptown. It's like, well, but there's a foot wedge away of, using a golf analogy, to get there for a large chunk of that. So I mean, how we're considering these sort of gems inside and outside the boundary, it's got to be blurred as much as it's got to be firm, I think, for us to understand when we understand how different sectors are served, right?
We talked about that too, and there's a question of resolving that which has to do with the connectivity piece. So Alexandra or Waterloo Park, how much are they in the consciousness when you're walking along King Street? So how to connect them back in? How do people find their way there? Is it really truly part of that King Street promenade? And if not, how can we get it there with a few simple moves?
It's a great conversation. Councillor Maven.
And thank you, Chair Beath. Thank you, Councillor Henry, for asking my question about Waterloo Park. Much appreciated. I see some nice openings here for a lot of good uses for the Uptown. And one of the things that has bothered me during this term of council is that, we're building a place to have people live, but we're not giving them a whole lot to do. And I'm hoping this public realm policy will get into the to-do things than it will be, whether it's culture or whether it's walking the park, whatever. But not having Waterloo Park in it sort of didn't make sense to me. We emphasized walking in the policy, and then we say Waterloo Park's too far to walk? I don't know. But somewhere on the lines, that Waterloo Park should be considered in our final conclusions.
The Urban Caroline intersection is one of the detractors.
Definitely, yeah, but that's a challenge, that's all.
Or challenges, yes. One of the opportunities, yes.
Are there any more questions for the delegation? Seeing none. Thank you, Brenda. That was great.
Thanks very much. Thank you all for reading it in depth.
That's great. Mayor Jaworski, would you like to move the motion? Thank you. Get a seconder. Councillor Freeman, thank you. Oh, okay. Okay. Seconded by Councillor Durrell then. Any more comments or questions? I'll call the motion then. All in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Exciting. Okay. Item C, potential patio lease agreement at 75 King Street South at the Waterloo Public Square. We have Justin McFadden with a presentation.
Okay.
Welcome.
Thank you. Hopefully this will be a very quick presentation. So staff was approached by Waterloo Town Square for a potential patio lease for a new restaurant that will be going into the space previously inhabited by Carl's Jr. Right on Public Square. So I've got a few slides here. First one, just kind of, I've got a few pictures that will sort of denote exactly where this is, but just a few terms in terms of what's being proposed. So looking at a lease rate of $3,000 annually for 5 years, it's about a 350 square foot space. What this will allow the city to do is acquire a 1.5 meter public walkway adjacent in front of the square, running from Willis Way to the front door beside Beertown. Today that's actually not a public walkway. It's there by the grace of the owner. So this will secure that into the future for us, and will of course meet AODA standards. The city will reserve the right to close the patio up to 5 times a year for certain events, or as we see fit to support certain activities that are happening in the square. And the lessee would not be permitted to sublet the patio, which would give us some control. If a new restaurant or a new tenant moved in there, we could decide whether it makes sense to continue on with the patio. So in terms of the design, you can see on the south side here, I'll see if this little mouse, there we go. So this would be Willis Way here. The restaurant would sit on the corner walkway, and then there's the triangular piece of 350 square foot piece of property that is in the square today. It's important to note that about a third of this piece of property is actually owned by the square, and the city owns about 2/3 of it, but the patio itself would take up the entire space. Another little aerial view, and another shot of it which denotes the walkway. And then this gives you kind of the visual. So this probably looks very familiar to most folks. So that it's this triangular piece today that's mostly shrubbery. We do have the Christmas tree in there at Christmas time. We would continue discussions with the prospective tenant to maintain the Christmas tree there in the winter, because the patio would only be used during patio season. This little piece here would come down so people could access it, and then of course you'd have servers and what have moving back and forth, a little bit of patio here, and then 1.5 meters right there for the public walkway through. Another shot of the piece of property, and you can see this is seating that would be maintained today as we go forward in the square. So an interesting opportunity to add to the patio culture in Uptown, and also add some activity to the Uptown Square, and also the funding of $3,000 per year would be used for cultural enhancement purposes in the Uptown. So that's a quick summary. If anybody has any questions.
Thank you, Justin. Are there any questions from council? Okay. Thank you. Do I have someone? Melissa, Councillor Durham, would you like to move that? Seconder? Councillor Whaley? Any more discussion? All right, I call the motion. All in favor? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Another patio Uptown. Okay, we have an informal public meeting up next. Zone change application Z 1805, 84 and 86 Hickory Street, and 284 and 286 Albert Street. This is an informal public meeting. There will be no decisions made tonight. Council and the public are seeing this application for the first time. Council is looking for feedback from interested parties with respect to this application. Tonight's comments will be taken into consideration in developing a staff position on this application, and a staff report will be considered by Council during a formal public meeting at a future meeting. All property owners within 120 meters of the subject land and anyone who signs the registry will receive notice of the formal public meeting. Anybody who wants further notice of this application, including the formal public meeting and passage of any bylaw, should sign the appropriate registry located on the desk at the rear of the council chambers. If there is more than one registry, I don't think there is, not tonight. Please make sure you sign the right one. The planner will now provide a brief overview of the application. So Rita Sislok, welcome. Take it away.
Thank you, Chair Reith, Mayor Jaworski, members of committee, ladies and gentlemen. This is an informal public meeting for 8486 Hickory Street West and 284-286 Albert Street, zoning bylaw amendment Z 1805. The application has been submitted by Le Home Ltd, represented here tonight by Trevor Hawkins of MHBC Planning. The subject site is located within the Northdale neighborhood on the north side of Hickory Street between Albert Street and Hemlock Street. This is a close-up of the subject site, which is a consolidation of 4 lots. The site is uniquely situated with frontage on 3 streets: Hickory Street, Albert Street, and Hemlock Street. Another unique aspect of the site is there is a significant grade change as one moves from Albert Street and Hickory Street down towards Hickory and Hemlock. In terms of the surrounding land uses, single detached dwellings are located to the west, southwest, and south of the subject site. The block development, which is currently under construction, consisting of 4 to 6-story apartment buildings, is located to the southeast of the site. A future park owned by the City of Waterloo is to be located to the east. Where am I here? Here we go. To the east of the site. And finally, Ivy Towns 2, a 3-story apartment building, is located to the north of the site. I would like to note for you that through the consolidation of the 4 lots, this area here will be developed, and there will be no orphan lots remaining in this area of Northdale. Next, I'll share some pictures of the site. This slide shows 84 and 86 Hickory Street West. The picture on top was taken standing on Hickory Street West, and the picture on the bottom was taken from Hemlock Street, looking west towards Albert Street. This slide shows 284 and 286 Albert Street. The picture on the top was taken standing at Hickory Street West, and the picture on the bottom was taken standing at Albert Street, looking east. If you look close enough, you can actually see Ivy Towns 2 to the north of the site, over here, and over here. In terms of the official plan, the subject site is located within Special Policy Area 45, and it is designated low-density residential, which allows for apartment buildings a maximum density of 250 beds per hectare, bonusing with a maximum density of 600 beds per hectare, subject to council approval, and a maximum height of 6 stories. In terms of zoning bylaw 1108, the subject site is zoned holding Northdale Mixed Use 6, which permits apartment buildings, a maximum density of 250 beds per hectare, and a maximum height of 21.5 meters. This is a conceptual building perspective of the proposed residential apartment building, received at the time of the zoning bylaw amendment submission. It generally depicts the proposed design for the building. Excuse me 1 second. It is my understanding that the applicant has slightly redesigned the building over the last couple of days by removing the 7th level to ensure compliance with the official plan's maximum 6-story height limit. I will let Trevor Hawkins walk you through the aspects of the newly designed buildings, as I did not receive a copy of the redesigned rendering in time for this meeting. This is a conceptual site plan of the proposed development. The applicant is proposing a 6-story residential apartment building with 115 units containing a total of 143 bedrooms. These numbers will be different from what is available on the website because, again, there was a change in the application at the last minute. There will also be 63 parking spaces located on site, which represents a rate of 0.44 spaces per bedroom, and 31 bike parking spaces will be located on site as well. Access to the site will be off of Hemlock Street through here. There will be 9 parking spaces at grade at the back of the building. There will be a further 19 parking spaces under the cantilevered portion of the building, also at grade, and 35 parking spaces will be located within the underground parking garage of the building. The applicant has requested to amend the existing zoning on the lands from H and MU6 to MU6 with site-specific provisions to permit a flankage yard setback of 7 meters along Hemlock Street, whereas the zoning bylaw limits the maximum flankage yard setback to 6 meters. This increase is to accommodate a required hydro easement for a hydro switchgear along Hemlock Street. The applicant is also looking to utilize density bonusing to increase the number of permitted bedrooms from 71 bedrooms or 250 beds per hectare to 143 bedrooms or 497 beds per hectare. This represents an increase of 72 bedrooms on site. In exchange for the requested density increase, the applicant is looking to contribute $10,000 per additional bedroom towards community benefits. Finally, the applicant is looking to remove the holding provision from the subject site. I would like to note that as of this morning, the applicant has removed their original request to permit a building height increase from 21.5 meters to 24.5 meters. Because the building was redesigned, there's no need for that additional request. These are the reports and plans submitted by the applicant. All of this information is available on the city's website on our zone change applications webpage. The submitted information is currently being reviewed by city and regional staff. And moving forward, in light of the change to the building, staff will be working with the applicant to obtain amendments to some of these reports and plans. In terms of next steps, staff will complete our review of the reports and plans submitted. Staff will assess whether the proposed bonusing request and proposed development constitutes good planning. Staff will consider any feedback received from the public, commenting agencies, city staff, and of course any feedback received from council tonight. Then staff will prepare a staff report with recommendations to council and will hold a formal public meeting for this application, at which point council will make a final determination on the proposed zoning bylaw amendment. That concludes my presentation. If there are any questions, I would be happy to answer them.
Okay. I just want to remind council that questions, it's only questions of clarification for this. Councillor Henry.
Thank you, Chair Reith, and thank you, Rita. I know we'd spoken previously on this file, and so I'll reserve many of my questions for the applicant's planner, who apparently we've never seen in these chambers before, in a few minutes. So just for you, I understand that transportation assessment was done, and there'll be a number of studies that will need a review based on the redesign of the building. I'm wondering if we can insist with the applicant that in that redesign we take a look at what comparable buildings in terms of unit mix and size actually have had. Because I noticed in the first transportation impact we were seeing 5-bed units on Leicester that were built a number of years ago and perhaps serve the market in a different way as the test case for how parking would work. I'm not sure about that, especially since the parking ratio here is nearly double the minimum parking standard, at least as initially conceived. So that suggests something in terms of the parking load. So I think there might be an opportunity for, if a revised transportation analysis is going to be done, to make sure we're considering the right thing. The question I had was, I was wondering how we would and when, through a development process, we would be, considering any potential impact from the height of the building or the configuration of the height of the building on our new, public parkette just across the street. I think we just heard a strong presentation from Stantec in terms of the Uptown, and we've spent some money on that public park regard design. But I'm wondering how and when those considerations may come into review as part of this application.
Sure. Through you, Chair Reith, to Councillor Henry. Through staff review, obviously, we would be looking at the density proposal and the massing of the building resulting from the density proposal. Through the site plan process would be probably the best time to look at the massing of the building and how that will impact any of the surrounding land uses. And that would be the next step, is for the applicant to submit a formal site plan application, at which point we would request a shadow study, detailed elevations, updated elevations, and we can take a look at what the impact would be on surrounding land uses.
Thank you. And I know we talked offline, so I should say it here as well, about should staff in their review and then council in their wisdom, agree to that this is a suitable location for density bonusing. I think it's likely appropriate for me to signal where I think some of the community interests might be on that at this time, so that everyone can work through them. I think similar to other applications in the neighborhood, those community benefits should be shared, and they should be retained predominantly in the neighborhood. I think similar to the prior application, active transportation, public realm, streetscape improvements are. In their broadest terms, are things that need the most work in Northdale. That as we are working through, we've done a number of those, and that needs to continue happening. And the community hub proposal with WCI and Laurier, both of those seem like excellent opportunities. Should this be an appropriate site for density bonusing? So I think identifying those as helpful comments for future review.
Are there any more questions for our planner? Seeing none, thank you very much, Rita. Now would like to ask our registered delegation, Trevor Hawkins from MHBC Planning. Welcome, Trevor.
Thank you, Chair Veith, Mayor Jaworski, members of council. Rita's done an excellent job of outlining the merits of the application. It's at 84 and 86 Albert and 284 to 86 Hickory, so it encompasses the block of Hickory Street between Albert and Hemlock Streets. These are older images, but they're actually raised a little bit higher than the ones that Rita was able to show us, so it gives council a little bit broader context of the neighborhood and some of the changes that we've seen over the years, looking all the way west towards the UW campus and the Ion stop. You see Columbia Street, the Hub project on the north side of Columbia Street at Albert, the new buildings that have now been erected on Phillip Street at Columbia, the block development and how it has progressed through its phases, and some of the 6-story buildings being constructed now, and some of the development south on Hemlock Street towards University Avenue, and on Lester Street as well. Again, the subject property outlined in red at that intersection of Albert, Hickory, and Hemlock back here. And we're just looking south towards University Avenue, where a number of the taller buildings with NMU 12 zoning permission have been or were under construction at the time of this photo. So this rendering is a little bit different than the one that we saw in Rita's presentation. And the biggest changes you will see were the corner. This is if I'm standing at the corner of Albert and Hickory. It's at the tallest part of the site, and there was concerns from staff's perspective that the building appeared to be a 7-story building because it has such a severe grade. The average grade as you move east towards Hemlock Street is quite dramatic, and Hemlock Street is over 5 meters lower than Albert Street. So it's a difficult site to work with. It was a very difficult site to meet what ended up being a 6-story building, or what could be evaluated as a 6-story building. So we've been working with staff over the past few weeks and believe that the rendering that council sees tonight does meet that 6-story test. It actually is a 5-story building for all intents and purposes at Albert Street, but it maintains that 6-story height as you travel east towards Hemlock Street. I should go through some of the other important stats here. One of the things that Councillor Henry actually alluded to was the mix of unit types. So this building's a little bit different than perhaps what Council's seen in a number of the other buildings that we see proposed in Northdale or built in Northdale are one-bedroom units or even bachelor suites or one-bedroom plus den, but this particular building has a mix of 1, 2, and 3-bedroom units. So the 3-bedroom units, while 10 or 15 years ago might have been attractive to only the student demographic, as Waterloo grows and it shifts and the built form intensifies and families are looking for housing closer to the Uptown or closer to where they might work in this part of Waterloo, a 3-bedroom unit is conducive to appealing to families. Maybe it won't be appealing to families on November 1st of 2019, but maybe on November 1st of 2025 as this neighborhood transitions and becomes a diverse neighborhood of students and families. The units that face Hickory Street, which is the longest frontage of the building, meet that 4.5 meter tall test in the NMU zone. So the idea there would be in the future, if there's a desire in a market for commercial units, the building's been designed to accommodate that change. The parking, again, Councillor Henry pointed out, most projects that are built in Northdale hit that parking minimum right on the number. This building actually exceeds it by a fair bit, almost twice as much as the requirement, provides surface parking for the visitors, and then has another 54 parking spaces for the residents. So again, the notion of providing more parking than the minimum will assist this building in appealing to more than just a student demographic. As Rita noted, the access to the site is from Hemlock Street, so there's no access along the Green Street, which is Hickory Street, so it can maintain its active presence, and the public realm isn't impacted by a driveway entrance from Hickory Street. The building has indoor amenity space and outdoor amenity space, so it has the rooftop amenity space in a couple of locations, but it also has a level and a half of indoor amenity space. And to echo Councillor Henry's comments about the streetscape, it's one of the focal points of the design of the building is how this building interacts with Hickory Street and Albert Street and Hemlock Street. So it has 3 street frontages, and there's been great effort made to address all 3 streets. This is a very rudimentary, just to show you the actual footprint of the building. The entrance from Hemlock Street, so there's a hydro switchgear, so one of the aspects of the zoning request is really just for this one corner of the building. The bylaw would say you need to be between 3 and 6 meters from Hemlock Street, and all of this part of the building would meet that, but because hydro is being buried on Hickory Street, you need to install the infrastructure to accommodate it, and this property was lucky enough to be one of the chosen few to install the switchgear, and that is the sole reason for that setback relief in this location. So the main entrance to the building is on Hickory Street, so pedestrian can walk right up to the building, barrier-free access from Albert Street into the main entrance to the building, and then there are individual units on Albert Street, on Hemlock Street, and on Hickory Street that have their own private entrances to their units. And again, some of the ones on Hickory Street could be converted into commercial units in the future because they have that interface directly with the street. So the requested zoning is very straightforward. The first is for that setback I alluded to because of the hydro switchgear, and the second is for the density bonusing increase for an additional 72 bedrooms. So the NMU zone would allow up to 600 bedrooms per hectare through bonusing, and this development comes in at 496 bedrooms per hectare. And as all properties in Northdale have a holding symbol on them until they achieve the tests that are required in the bylaw, this application will be seeking to remove the holding process as it evolves and ultimately comes back to council with a complete package. In terms of the supporting studies, we did prepare the planning report and urban design brief for staff to review, which will carry forward into the site plan part of the process. The traffic study, as Councillor Henry's already pointed out, did borrow some traffic data from buildings that really aren't perhaps the best match for this project, because this project would appeal to a broader demographic than certainly those buildings on Leicester Street do or were intended to. So that's something we can circle back with our team as well as staff and revisit some of those numbers. I think it's more to give council and staff a comfort level on how the traffic will distribute from the site. There's no issue with the parking supply on the site. It greatly exceeds it. But with some of the changes in the neighborhood, with Hickory Street being one way in this location, just some information about how traffic can disperse and where it can go from this site. We looked at the functional servicing, so the servicing really, water was upgraded for the Ivy Towns project, so there's a possibility that we'll have to extend the sewer slightly from the Ivy Towns project to this site. You're looking at me as though I have, I'm looking at the clock, I've still got 3 minutes. I thought you were looking at me there. In terms of the, give me the eye there, wasn't it? Did a quick glance over the clock and I'm good. In terms of the acoustical impact study, mostly was to deal with the road noise from Albert Street. There will be a warning clause required because of that road noise. And then the HVAC equipment, we haven't nailed down the exact acoustic projections from that equipment, which we will sort through the site plan process to make sure that we have the right numbers. In terms of overall, the project meets the intent of Northdale in terms of its built form, the way it addresses all the 3 streets, and particularly the unit mix. I think that's something that this project's made a great effort to appeal to a broader demographic, and the unit mix really reflects that. It's a high-quality building that will, it's on an important street and really addresses 3 streets, but Hickory Street is one of the first big buildings that will encompass this block of Hickory Street, and being so close to the city's park, some of the design elements of this building will really complement that location, as will the park, the building. And so we've made an effort to address Hemlock Street and Albert Street and not just Hickory Street, and I think the rendering that I showed earlier really speaks to that. Thank you, Chair Veith. Be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Trevor. Are there any questions? Councillor, Mayor Jaworski first, then Councillor Whaley.
Thank you, through the chair. You're getting pretty jittery there. Maybe you're afraid Cam's going to be out there unplugging your EV for your bolt from the EV station right now.
He is taunting me with his new Audi, so.
Yes, he is. Very interesting and insightful comment about the continued transition in Northdale and the provision of 3-bedroom units. Maybe you could comment a bit more on that, but in particular I was asking how many 3-bedroom units are contemplated at this time?
Through you, Chair Veith, to Mayor Jaworski, there's 6 3-bedroom units and 16 2-bedroom units. So I think one of the aspects that Councillor Durrell is probably familiar with in the Uptown is that when you are trying to bring a lot of people into the Uptown and you're telling people who want to live in Waterloo that we don't have any more single detached housing, or not very much more new housing to build. And if you want to move to Waterloo, you're going to have to perhaps warm yourself to an apartment lifestyle or condominium lifestyle. But if you only build 1-bedroom units and 1-bedroom plus 10 units, then it's difficult to attract families, which means jobs, which means people moving to Waterloo. And I think Northdale, its location lends itself to the sort of employment hub of UW campus and Laurier and some of the work in the R&T park. And with the accessibility of transit, it could be another area where people are seeking an urban lifestyle and they want a diverse choice of product, and I think this building provides that.
And then the second question was on bike spaces. I think it said 29. How did you come up with that number? I'm just thinking with 150 bedrooms, that's essentially a bike for 1 every 5 people. Are they going to be protected spaces or secure spaces, or how would that work?
Again, through your chair, Veith, the bike spaces are in the building, and the bylaw requires a certain number of bike spaces. In this project, I think it might have 1 or 2 more than the bylaw requires, but certainly that was the aim.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Whaley.
The rendering you have here just gives people no idea how really steep Hickory Hill is. From past memory, I can remember taking a skateboard from Albert Street right to King Street.
With no helmet, I'm sure.
Well, it wasn't recently that I did that. But it's a remarkable hill, so this is an intriguing design to me, having lived in the neighborhood. I'm interested in all the private entrances on the front. Is that to take you to private 3-bedroom residences, multi-story residences within the building?
Through your chair, Veith, it will take you into individual units, and the units are quite, they're almost loft-style units because of the grade challenges that were presented. Some of the ceiling heights are 4.5, 5 and a bit meters, so they're actually spacious units that could appeal to someone seeking that type of a unit, or in the future, like I said, are easily convertible to a commercial unit.
Fascinating design.
Councillor Henry.
Thank you, Chair Veith, and thank you, Trevor. I'm glad to have others go first. It means they can knock off some of the things from my list that I haven't asked, and you you aptly sort of addressed a number of my tangential comments to Rita in your presentation. If you back up to your rudimentary sort of site plan, building footprint map, that one, the northwest corner is an interesting corner of this building in terms of a consolidated open space, which I understood from prior renderings is over top of your parking deck. I'm curious what you're envisioning for that space. I mean, I know one of the things that we've been talking about through our comprehensive zoning review and others is having folks consolidate as much of the open space as possible on their lot so that it can be functional space. But given the proximity to the neighbor and the ramp and the rest, I am curious about the use of that area and what the vision is from your client, because as I recall, one of the amenity areas sort of overlooks onto that area. So,
well, through you, Chair Veith, to Councillor Henry, I think in terms of outdoor amenity space, the first choice, if I was living in this building, would be to use the city's wonderfully designed, future designed park across the street. So it's very accessible to public open space right across the street. It does have rooftop amenity space as well. So those would be certainly your focal points if you were looking for outdoor amenity space. There's lots of units that have their own terraces as well, so they have their own private amenity space. That particular spot on Albert and Hickory, just past the building, is difficult to design from a landscape perspective because it's squeezed right up against the Ivy Town project, which this building set back 7.5 meters from the lot line, and you can see that the Ivy Town is probably more closer to 2 to 3 meters from the lot line. So there's not a lot of space that would get full sun throughout the day. You're more likely to use the rooftop amenity space, which wouldn't have quite the same shadow impacts, or the city's park across the street. Would be more conducive to sort of softer outdoor amenity areas.
Well, I think that's probably true, which is why I asked the question, because it's an unusually large sort of parcel that's sort of sitting there unspaced or programmed. So, as if I can ask a Councillor Whaley kind of question, is this an area you might consider planting, substantial, trees or other greenery, given the loss of greenery that sometimes happens through redevelopment? And will there be enough, soil space that's provided to be able to actually support the growth of said trees and canopy to retain it in the neighborhood? Sounds like a good Councillor Whaley style question.
Through you, Chair Veith, I think one of the bonusing items you outlined in your earlier comments to Rita was streetscape improvements, and one of the things that goes with the streetscape is trees. So that's an area that we can look at for some. It would take obviously some engineering and some structural review to determine how the soil could be supported, but that's something that we'll look at and circle back with Rita on as a potential item that we can view through the bonusing process.
Okay, thank you. Are there any more questions for Trevor? Seeing none, thank you very much for that great presentation. I will now ask anyone out there, if any delegations that are not registered, to come forward. Is there anyone who would like to speak to this? Okay then, if there are no more delegations, this informal public meeting is now concluded. Staff will review the issues and provide further reporting to Council at a later date. Thank you very much. Okay, just a few things left on here. Consideration of notice of motion given at a previous meeting, none. No notice of motion. Number 10, communications and correspondence. I don't see any. Regional information and correspondence, there's none. Any unfinished business, Council? New business, Councillor Durrell, do you have some new business?
Well, I might. So I had this really interesting, container cafe basically fall into our lap in Uptown. And so it would be 7 containers, and I don't know what to do with it, so I'm hoping staff will.
Thank you for that. I'm gonna pass that over to Mr. Anderson.
No. Yes.
Containers but no land.
Yes, containers but no land.
Thanks, Chair Veith. I'll pick that one up. Having a little bit of a conversation with Councillor Durrell. This is a container opportunity, a shipping container opportunity that has come to light. It does require a little more research from our perspective, from a staff perspective, so we are going to recommend it gets referred to staff if that's the inclination of council. And the concept, again, would be to look at an opportunity on city land somewhere in the Uptown area or along the Ion corridor where it might be suitable for a pilot installation just to test it out. But again, there's a lot of details to unfold, including any costs related to the installation for the city to be responsible for, and just how long the installation might occur. It's a couple of factors like that we'd just like a little more time to report back on.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. I think as I was reading the public realm strategy, I kept thinking about this, and so I'm hoping that maybe this would be something that really aligns nicely with that project. So thank you, and I appreciate the going forward with it.
Thank you, Councillor Durrell and staff for that. Any other business from councillors? I just want to, oh, sorry.
Sorry, perhaps we could just have a motion then to direct staff into that.
May I move that motion then to have staff look at the Container Cafe Art Gallery concept in Uptown Waterloo.
Thank you. And do we have a seconder for that? Councillor Burke, all in favor? Thank you. Carried. I just wanted to mention the very successful mayor's dinner that was held on the weekend in support of the Working Centre. Thank you, Mayor Jaworski and Mayor Verbanovic and Mayor Craig from Cambridge. It was a great event. Everybody had a lot of fun and a great cause. So I think they probably did very well. All right. State of the City's coming up in 2 days. Wednesday morning, again. We're going to have our mayor for a day, our councillors for a day, introduced at that event. And we're giving out the Rotary is giving out some awards at that event too. So I'd say get your tickets, but I think they're all sold, right? So anyway, anything else? Okay, would anybody like to move to adjourn this meeting? Councillor Henry? Councillor Freeman, all in favor? Meeting adjourned, but we have a very special meeting coming up, Mayor Jaworski.
Welcome to a special council meeting of City of Waterloo, Monday, April 9th, 2018. Disclosure of pecuniary interest and general nature thereof. Seeing none. Somebody want to enact some bylaws? Councillor Burke, Councillor Freeman, all those in favor? That's all of us. Motion to adjourn. Councillor Freeman, Councillor Maven, all those in favor? That's all of us. Thank you.